Today, I will tell you how my son-in-law claimed my $25 million ski lodge after I nursed him back to health. Then, with the fire behind him, he ordered me out into the snow. He said, "You have no place here anymore." That night, he did not expect my silent defense. If this story moves you, remember to like and subscribe so you never miss more grandma life stories filled with dignity, justice, and lessons worth carrying. Share your thoughts in the comments. I read them all. My name is Vivian Hale. I am 70 years old, a widow, and for decades the heart of my life has been the ski lodge my late husband William and I built in Aspen, Colorado. Every beam, every stone, every rail was touched by our hands. To us, it was not just real estate. It was proof that love and perseverance could survive the harshest winters. That evening, the mountain wind chased me as I climbed the snowy steps of the porch. The roofline shimmered under moonlight and the railings sparkled with ice. I had one suitcase in hand, and in the other I carried a chipped ceramic cup William had used every morning. It was cracked but unbroken, like me. But the moment I reached the door, the world shifted. I heard laughter. Not my own, not William's. Strange laughter spilling from inside what was supposed to be my refuge. Through the frosted glass I saw firelight and moving shadows. I opened the door. Warmth rushed out, but it was not welcoming. Inside, my son-in-law Andrew stood tall near the fireplace, a glass of wine raised like a trophy. My daughter Clara sat close by, her eyes lowering the instant she saw me. And across from them, Gerald and Sylvia, Andrew's parents, reclined in comfort as though they were the rightful owners. Gerald's silver hair gleamed in the firelight. Sylvia's pearls glistened at her throat. They looked like hosts, not guests. Andrew's eyes locked on mine. His voice was steady, cruel in its calm. "Vivian, you are not allowed here anymore. This lodge belongs to us now. It is my parents' home." Sylvia swirled her glass and added with a faint smile, "It is wasted on a widow. We will make it what it should be." Gerald leaned forward. "It is better this way. You can let go with grace." And Clara, my only child, said nothing. She only stared at the floor. That silence was a deeper wound than their words. The fire crackled behind them. My throat closed, but I refused to give them my tears. Instead, I gave them something they did not expect. I smiled. A quiet, deliberate smile. To them, it looked like surrender. To me, it was the first move in a defense they could not see. I lifted my suitcase, stepped back into the cold, and let the door close behind me. The night wind struck my face, but inside me, something steadier whispered, "This is not the end." I pressed my thumb to the crack in William's old cup. A crack does not mean broken. It means survived. And so would I. Andrew's gaze cut into me like a blade. His voice was stripped of warmth, clipped and absolute. "Vivian, this is no longer yours. It belongs to my parents now. You need to leave." Sylvia leaned back in the chair as though she had already claimed the walls around her. Her lips curved into a thin, merciless smile. "What use does a widow have for a ski lodge of this scale? $25 million frozen in cedar and stone. It deserves younger hands. We will give it the life you cannot." Her words burned, but it was Clara who tore deepest into me. My daughter, my blood, sat rigid, silent. She did not defend me. Her eyes, downcast but steady, confirmed what my heart had already feared. Betrayal was no longer a shadow. It stood in front of me, wearing my daughter's face. I drew a breath, but before I could speak, Andrew closed the distance. His hand was firm, his grip unyielding on my arm. He guided me, not gently, toward the doorway. "Don't make this harder than it has to be," he said, his tone flat, practiced, like a man issuing orders rather than speaking to family. The fire snapped behind him, casting his shadow long across the floorboards. I could feel the heat at my back and the sting of cold seeping through the crack of the door. Gerald rose halfway from his chair, watching as if presiding over a transaction, not a theft. His approval was quiet but heavy in the room. I tried to lock eyes with Clara one last time. "Clara," I whispered, "you know what this house means." Her lips parted, but no words came. Her silence was her answer. Andrew pushed the door wide, snow flurries tumbling inside. The mountain wind howled, carrying with it a sharpness that stung my face. In one motion, he forced me across the threshold. My shoes slid on the icy boards of the porch, my suitcase jolting against the rail. Then came the sound, sharp, final, the slam of the door. Wood striking wood, iron catching in the lock. For a heartbeat, I simply stood there, breath stolen, body trembling from the sudden cold. Behind that closed door was warmth, firelight, my family, everything I had built. In front of me stretched snow, silence, and betrayal, so complete it could have swallowed me whole. Sylvia's laughter reached me even through the heavy door, muffled but cruel. Gerald's voice followed, calm, as if sealing a verdict. "It's settled. She'll accept it. She has nowhere else to go." I gripped the handle of my suitcase. The frost bit at my fingers, the leather stiff beneath my hand. My heart hammered, but not from despair. I smiled. It was small at first, just the faint curl of lips, but it spread with purpose. To them it would look like defeat. To them it would mean they had broken me. But I knew better. The cold around me was brutal, but clarity came with it. Andrew believed power was in force. Sylvia and Gerald believed possession was proof of ownership. Clara believed silence was safety. They all believed they understood me. But none of them had seen the years I had endured. None of them had held William's hand through illness, rising every morning with hope and ending every night with grief. None of them had built these walls with sweat and patience. They thought pushing me into the snow would erase me. They mistook stillness for surrender. I pressed my thumb against the crack in William's chipped cup inside my bag. A reminder. Cracks are not endings. They are survival lines. I straightened my back, snowflakes clinging to my coat, hair whipping across my cheeks. My voice rose, calm but edged, so even the wind would carry it back through the wood. You believe tonight is victory. You believe I have nothing. But the house knows whose hands built it, and so does the law. Inside, I heard movement. Andrew's muffled words, irritated, dismissive. "She's bluffing. Let her go. She'll crawl back." Sylvia's laughter again, sharp as glass. "Let her smile. A smile is all she has." They believed the door had closed on me. In truth, it had opened to something far greater. The snow crunched beneath my boots as I stepped off the porch. The cold bit at my skin, but it did not weaken me. It forged me. My suitcase weighed heavy, but my will was heavier. I whispered into the night, not for them, but for myself. This isn't over. Not by miles. The lodge glowed behind me, fire flickering in the windows. A fortress stolen for now. But every fortress has foundations, and I knew where they lay. The ruthless push was not my end. It was my beginning. The slam of that door had not yet faded from my ears when another sound rose in my mind, the beeping of hospital machines. My eyes no longer saw the snow swirling around me. They saw white walls, antiseptic light, and the frail body of my son-in-law stretched across a bed 3 winters ago. Andrew had been reckless on the slopes, pushing speed beyond his strength. One moment of arrogance, and the mountain punished him. His body slammed against the ice, ribs broken, his breath stolen. I was the one who rode beside the ambulance, gripping his hand while Clara trembled, and Gerald and Sylvia were nowhere to be found. Doctors spoke in hushed tones. "The injuries are severe. He will need surgery. Weeks of care. The bills will climb." Clara's eyes filled with fear, and I stepped forward before she could collapse. "Do it," I said, my voice sharp. "Save him. I will cover the cost." For months, I cooked meals in my Denver kitchen and drove them to the hospital. I changed his sheets when he was finally discharged. I sat by his side at the lodge, spoon-feeding soup, while snowstorms howled outside. I paid every invoice that arrived, the figures heavy enough to crush most families. Gerald never came. Sylvia never called. It was my hands that steadied him, my resources that kept him alive. One night, when fever racked him and sweat drenched the sheets, Andrew's weak hand grasped mine. His voice was hoarse, almost gone, but the words cut through. "I owe you my life. I'll never forget, Vivian. Never." Those words echoed now, colliding with the reality of his hand shoving me out into the snow. The same hand that once clung to mine in desperation had turned into the hand that forced me from the home I had built. The memory sharpened, not softened. I recalled the trembling of his fingers, the tears in Clara's eyes, the exhaustion that lined my face each morning after sleepless nights at his bedside. I remembered how I defended him when neighbors whispered that he was reckless, that his accident was the cost of pride. "He's family," I told them. "Family deserves a second chance." Family. That was the word that drove me then. Now it was the knife twisted into me. I stood in the snow outside my own door, breath clouding in the freezing air, and the betrayal slammed harder than any blizzard. My body trembled, not from the cold, but from clarity. Gratitude had rotted into entitlement. My sacrifice had been buried under their hunger for possession. Inside the lodge, I heard faint sounds, the clinking of glasses, voices muffled but triumphant. Sylvia's laughter, Gerald's low murmur, Clara's silence, Andrew's arrogance. Their chorus of betrayal played against the memory of Andrew's fragile whisper in the hospital bed. I clenched my jaw. My pulse steadied. The images of past and present fused, each one feeding the other. His promise, "I'll never forget," now lay shattered at my feet like the shards of trust. But shards can still cut. The snow swirled harder, stinging my face, but I did not flinch. I let the wind carve its reminder into me. Every moment I had carried him through sickness would now carry me through this fight. I would not erase the memory of my care. I would wield it. The mountain had taken Andrew down once before. I had lifted him back up. Now, in his greed, he had chosen to strike me. But he had underestimated the strength of the woman who had already outlasted storms fiercer than him. I whispered to the night, voice low but edged like steel. "You said you owed me your life. Tonight you pay that debt, Andrew, not in gratitude, but in the weight of what you have chosen to become." I turned from the closed door, my boots sinking deep into the snow. Each step away from the lodge was a step toward the war they had invited. The knife in my back was real, but I would not bleed from it. I would sharpen it into the blade of my defense. The memory of Andrew's frailty, of his whispered vow, burned hotter than the fire they had stolen inside. And as the wind whipped down the mountain, I knew this betrayal was not the end. It was the beginning of the reckoning. The drive down the mountain was brutal. Snow lashed against the windshield like shards of glass. The tires struggled for grip on the icy road, and every curve threatened to send me into the abyss. Yet my eyes stayed sharp. I did not cry. My hands clenched the wheel with a force that steadied me. Behind me, the lodge glowed faint in the storm, but in front of me stretched the road to Denver, long and dark, and I embraced it with unflinching resolve. On the passenger seat lay William's chipped ceramic cup, the same one he used every morning before he passed. As the car jolted over rough patches of ice, the cup rattled against the leather, vibrating with each turn. It was a sound only I could understand. That crack down the side was not a sign of weakness. It was proof of endurance. William's words returned to me, clear as if he sat beside me. "Never let anyone erase your name from the door we built together." He had said it years ago, on a summer afternoon when the lodge was nearly finished, his hands still rough with sawdust. That vow had lived in me quietly. Now it roared like the engine beneath my feet. The betrayal still stung, but the sting had already begun to harden into something sharper. It was no longer grief. It was strategy. Every mile I put between myself and Aspen gave me space to breathe and space to plan. I whispered into the empty car, my voice carrying the edge of steel. They think tonight was victory. They think silence means surrender, but silence is not submission. Silence is the pause before the strike. Headlights cut through the snow, and in their glow I saw flashes of memory. Andrew in a hospital bed, his voice weak, his hand gripping mine. Clara in her youth, laughing without shame, before ambition corroded her heart. Gerald and Sylvia parading false pride to cover their failures. These images no longer hurt. They fueled me. The storm thickened. The steering wheel trembled beneath my grip. I leaned forward, focused, repeating William's words in my mind. I could almost hear his voice over the howl of the wind. Hold the line, Vivian. You built more than walls. You built legacy. Protect it. The rage I carried no longer scattered my thoughts. It crystallized them. I would not confront them with tears or pleas. I would confront them with something far more dangerous. Preparation. The car slid slightly on a patch of black ice, jerking my body sideways. The cup rattled harder, clinking like a bell. I steadied the wheel, jaw locked. That sound was no accident. To me it was a warning. Stay awake, stay strong. Every crack carries a message. I thought of Clara's silence. Her eyes lowered when Andrew pushed me out. Her betrayal carved deep, but I did not collapse under it. I felt a strange calm instead. If she believed siding with her husband's parents would bring her security, then she had chosen poorly. She had forgotten the woman who raised her. She had mistaken gentleness for frailty. My breath fogged the glass, but my mind was clear. They had forced me out, but in doing so, they had revealed everything. Their arrogance, their entitlement, their assumption that I had no strength left. That assumption would be their undoing. I pressed harder on the gas, my eyes fixed on the distant lights of Denver. My thoughts sharpened into steps. Step 1. Gather the papers William had left me. Every deed, every trust, every clause. Step 2. Speak with Margaret, the lawyer who had stood by me for decades. Step 3. Record every insult, every threat, every attempt they made to erase me. Build a wall not of timber and stone, but of law and evidence. My voice rose, strong against the hum of the engine. You thought throwing me into the snow was the end. It was your first mistake. You will regret believing I had no fight left. The mountain curved again, the car leaning into the bend. I steadied the wheel, eyes locked forward. Behind me lay betrayal. Ahead of me the battlefield of justice. William's cup rattled once more, then stilled as the road smoothed. I reached over, fingers tracing the crack. It was warm from the heater, solid despite its flaw. I whispered, "You built it with me, William. You warned me this day could come. I listened, and now I will answer." Denver's lights glimmered faintly through the storm, a promise of shelter, but I felt no need for rest. My veins carried fire, not fatigue. I would arrive with purpose. I would arrive with plans already forming, sharper than any blade. I straightened in my seat, shoulders squared, eyes unblinking. The storm outside was fierce, but storms had never frightened me. I had walked through grief heavier than snow. I had faced silence colder than wind, and I had survived. This was not the night I was defeated. This was the night I began. The cup rattled once more as if to seal the vow. My lips curved into the same smile I had given them when they thought they had broken me. But now the smile carried weight. It was not surrender. It was declaration. I whispered to the storm, "Vivian Hale is not erased. She is written in stone." The road stretched before me, black and slick under the snow. Each mile brought me closer to the weapons they could not see: memory, law, truth, and resolve. They had no idea what silence could become. They had no idea what storm they had unleashed. I pressed down on the accelerator. The car surged forward, and with it, so did I. When I reached Denver, the storm was still clawing at the city, snow piling high against sidewalks and windows, but inside my house it was quiet. I closed the door behind me and exhaled. The silence was sharp. It wasn't comfort, it was focus. I dropped my suitcase in the hallway, wiped the wet from my coat, and went straight to the study. The shelves still held William's books on carpentry, old photographs of us hammering beams into place at the lodge. His presence lingered, not as a ghost, but as a constant reminder that he had prepared me for storms like this. I opened the bottom drawer of the mahogany desk and pulled out the metal box William had locked years ago. My hands didn't shake when I placed it on the table. The key was still on the chain around my neck, and with a firm twist, the box opened. Inside lay the lifeline, documents that carried more power than the roar of any fireplace or the smugness of any intruder. First was the deed, crisp, official, stamped in bold ink. My name was the only one printed there. Vivian Hale, sole owner of the Aspen Lodge. I ran my finger across the letters, steady and deliberate. Andrew's voice echoed in my mind. "This is no longer yours," and the ink beneath my hand mocked his arrogance. Next was the living trust. William had thought of everything. Years ago, before his heart gave out, he had insisted on transferring the lodge fully into my name, structured so that no one could contest it. "You'll need this someday," he had told me, serious and calm. At the time, I brushed it off as needless worry. Tonight, it was my shield. I unfolded the insurance policies: health, property, life. Each one updated, each one prepared with my name as beneficiary and trustee. William had left nothing to chance. He had known storms would come, not from weather, but from people. The papers covered the table like weapons laid out before battle. Deed, trust, insurance, receipts for years of maintenance, even tax records with my signature. If they wanted to play with law, I would crush them with the weight of truth. But as I studied the documents, a realization sharpened in me. My fight was not against legal systems. My position was ironclad. No court would ever strip me of ownership. The real enemy was not bureaucracy. It was blood. It was my own daughter's silence, my son-in-law's ingratitude, and his parents' obsession with status. The battle would not be won only with paperwork. It would be won with strategy that struck at the heart of their arrogance. I stacked the documents neatly, then set them aside. My mind raced, pacing the floor as if drawing lines on a battlefield. Andrew believed I would crumble because I was old. Clara believed my silence meant weakness. Gerald and Sylvia believed entitlement could substitute for effort. None of them understood what survival looked like. I looked back at the deed and whispered to William, though my voice carried the force of conviction. "You protected me even in death. You gave me the means to stand. Now it's my turn to use them." I picked up the trust and read through the clauses again. Each sentence confirmed what I already knew. My ownership was absolute. Andrew could drink wine in my chair. Sylvia could parade her pearls by my fireplace. Gerald could spit venom across the floorboards. Clara could stay quiet and look away. None of them could erase me. But victory wouldn't come from clinging to papers alone. I needed to turn their cruelty against them, let their words and actions expose the truth they thought they could hide. I needed to gather evidence, document every threat, every insult, every attempt to intimidate. The lodge was secure under my name, but their moral collapse would be displayed for the world to see. I sat back down at the desk, pulled out a fresh notebook, and wrote in clean, sharp lines, "Record everything. Build the case not for me, but for history." I wrote down the words Andrew had said. "You are not allowed here anymore. This is our home now." I wrote down Sylvia's sneer. "A widow has no use for a lodge." I wrote down Gerald's venom. "It is better this way. You can start over somewhere else." Clara's silence, too, I recorded. Silence is not absence. It is complicity. The pages filled quickly, my handwriting steady, each sentence a weapon, each memory a stone in the wall I was building. I stopped, lifted the chipped cup from my bag, and placed it on the table beside the deed. The crack down its side caught the lamplight, broken once, but not shattered, stronger for having endured. So was I. I leaned forward, my reflection sharp in the glass of the study window. The storm outside howled against the panes, but I did not hear it as threat. I heard it as chorus. "Stand," it seemed to say. "Strike when the moment comes." The lodge was mine by law, by blood, by memory. They had pushed me into the snow, but I had stepped back into strength. I knew exactly what my next move would be. I closed the box, locked it, and pressed the key back against my chest. My voice rang in the silence. "You think you threw me out. You only woke me up." I turned off the lamp. The room went dark, but inside me burned a light far brighter than any fire they had stolen. The documents were not just paper, they were proof. And proof was power. The snow outside continued to fall, relentless. So was I. The phone rang the next morning. I saw Clara's name on the screen, and for a brief second I hoped, foolishly, that she had reconsidered, that she would apologize for her silence in Aspen. I pressed accept, held the phone to my ear, and waited. Her voice came fast, clipped, restless. "Mother, I need you to listen. You don't understand why this matters. I just want the lodge because I'm tired of being looked down on. All my life I've felt small. This is my chance not to be the woman everyone dismisses." I gripped the edge of the desk, staring at the papers I had organized the night before. My chest tightened, not from pity, but from recognition. Clara wasn't just greedy. She was obsessed, chained by her hunger for validation. I kept my voice even. "Clara, the lodge is not a stage for you to parade on. It's a home. Your father and I built it with sweat and sacrifice. Do you think friendship and respect can be bought with walls of cedar and stone?" Her breath caught, then came the bitter laugh. "Easy for you to say. You never had to stand in rooms where everyone whispered that you weren't enough. I went to college with people whose families owned estates in Palm Springs, ranches in Montana, penthouses in Manhattan. Do you know what it's like to always be the girl with the modest background, the one who married up, the one who's tolerated but never respected? I won't live like that anymore. The lodge gives me status. It tells them I belong." Her words spilled like poison, but I understood the wound she exposed. She had mistaken appearance for worth, status for strength. I answered with steel in my tone. "Belonging that is bought by stealing from your own blood is nothing but illusion. You think a house makes you equal? It makes you empty." Silence stretched. Then she snapped, "You don't get it, Mother. You've always been content with being ordinary. But I refuse to be ordinary. With the lodge, Andrew and I finally have the life we deserve. You can live quietly in Denver. Leave the mountains to us." Her words struck hard, not because of their cruelty, but because of the conviction in them. She believed every syllable. She had convinced herself that betrayal was justified, that tearing down her own mother was simply a step toward the perfection she craved. I breathed once, slow, letting the fury settle into clarity. "Clara, let me tell you what ordinary means. Ordinary is a woman staying awake at hospital bedsides, spoon-feeding soup to your husband when he couldn't lift a spoon. Ordinary is paying the bills when his own parents abandoned him. Ordinary is standing in the snow after being pushed from her own home and still finding the strength to smile. If that is ordinary, then I wear it with pride." On the other end, her breath hitched. For a moment I thought she might break, but her voice returned, sharp, defensive. "You'll never understand. You've never cared about appearances. But I care. I always have. If you won't step aside, then you'll make me your enemy." I straightened in my chair, eyes fixed on the documents laid before me, the proof of my ownership. "No, Clara, you made yourself my enemy the moment you chose silence in that room, and you'll regret thinking appearances can shield you from truth." The line went dead. She had hung up. I set the phone down and stared at the crack in William's cup beside the stack of deeds. Clara's voice still rang in my head. I refused to be ordinary. That was the heart of it. Her obsession was not with comfort, not even with wealth. It was with being seen, admired, envied. The lodge was her talisman, her armor against an imagined humiliation. But I knew obsession when I saw it. Obsession blinds. Obsession destroys. And Clara's blindness had already led her to betray the one person who had given her everything. I whispered to the empty room, voice calm, cutting through the air like a blade. "You think this is about status, Clara. But status can crumble in a second. Legacy endures. You chose status. I chose legacy. And legacy will win." I gathered the documents once more, slid them back into the metal box, and locked it tight. Clara's confession had given me more than I expected. She had exposed her motive, her weakness, her obsession. And in exposing it, she had handed me the weapon I needed. The storm outside had calmed, the city wrapped in white silence. Inside, my resolve sharpened. My daughter had shown me the depth of her hunger. Now I would show her the depth of my strength. The lodge was mine by law, by memory, by right. But more than that, it was mine because I had never needed it to prove who I was. Clara believed a house could give her worth. I knew better, and that knowledge was the edge she could never dull. I stood, pressing the key to my chest once again, my voice firm, unshaken. You chose to make me your opponent, Clara, and you'll learn soon enough. I am not the one who breaks. The following day, I unlocked my laptop and accessed the security cameras I had installed in the lodge years ago. William had insisted we keep them in place for protection against intruders and wild animals. He used to laugh about the bears that wandered too close. He never imagined the true predators would come from within the family. The screen flickered, and the feed revealed the living room I once cherished. Gerald sat in William's leather chair, his posture straight, his fingers drumming against the armrest as though he were already king of the mountain. Sylvia lounged across from him, draped in my shawl, her pearls gleaming under the firelight. Their voices came clear, sharper than the crackle of flames. Gerald leaned forward, his eyes dark, voice heavy with pride disguised as pain. We lost everything in California. That house in Pasadena, the one with the columns and the rose garden, gone. Do you remember the looks on their faces when we packed our boxes? The neighbors, the bankers, even our so-called friends. They all laughed at us. They whispered that we had reached too high and fallen too hard. I swore that night I'd get it back. And now, here we are. Sylvia tilted her head, her smile brittle. We will not just get it back. We will rise higher. The lodge isn't just walls and snow, it is a crown. When people hear that we own a $25 million property in Aspen, they will forget every failure, every humiliation. They will look at us with envy again. They will invite us back into their circles. We will be admired, Gerald. Admired the way we should have been all along. I froze, listening to their obsessions spill out like a confession. It was not hunger for a home. It was hunger for status. They weren't after shelter. They were after spectacle. They wanted to erase their shame by stealing my legacy. Gerald clenched his fist on the arm of the chair. I cannot stand one more day of being ordinary. Do you hear me, Sylvia? Ordinary as death. I was born to be recognized, to be respected, and if it takes taking this lodge from Vivian, then so be it. She is old. She is weak. She has no place here anymore. Sylvia nodded, her voice smooth and poisonous. Vivian never cared for appearances. That is her flaw. She lived for family, for love, for her husband's memory. But none of that matters in this world. What matters is how people see you. I will walk into every event, every gathering, and they will whisper about us with awe again. I will not die being pitied. I will die envied. Their words burned in my ears. They revealed themselves fully, not as family, not as in-laws, but as enemies driven by vanity. I leaned closer to the screen, my jaw tight, my heart steady. They believed their scheme was invisible. They had no idea their voices were recorded, their arrogance documented. For a moment, the memory of Pasadena flashed across my mind. I had visited them once in that house, years before the collapse. The columns were tall, the garden lush, the parties loud with laughter. They had paraded wealth, but beneath it was debt. I remembered the whispers about Gerald's reckless investments, about Sylvia's endless spending. They built castles of glass, and when the market storm came, it shattered. Instead of learning humility, they carried the shards like weapons, cutting down anyone who reminded them of their fall. Now they targeted me. I pressed pause on the recording, the still image freezing Sylvia mid-smile, Gerald mid-sentence. My voice filled the empty study, sharp, unwavering. You think the lodge will heal your pride. You think status can be stolen. But all you are doing is exposing your desperation. You are not kings. You are beggars dressed in silk. I rewound the video, listened again, wrote down their words word for word into my notebook. Ordinary is death. I will not die being pitied. These phrases would be weapons. They would show the world what truly drove them. The screen flickered again as Andrew entered the frame. He looked uneasy, pacing by the fireplace. "Maybe this isn't the best way," he muttered. "What if Vivian fights back? She has resources. She has a lawyer." Gerald snapped at him. "You owe us, Andrew. We raised you to fight, not to cower. You will stand firm. She will fold." Sylvia touched Andrew's shoulder, her voice low but sharp. "Do not let her guilt bind you. She is weak. We are strong. Together we will take what we deserve." Andrew didn't answer. He only poured another glass of wine and sat down, his silence hanging heavy. I closed the laptop and locked it. My pulse did not race, it steadied. Their secret was no longer secret. I had it all recorded. Their vanity had handed me proof, and their arrogance had sealed their fate. I stood, my reflection in the dark window clear. The storm outside was easing, but inside me the storm was just beginning. My enemies were not faceless strangers. They were family bound by pride and poisoned by shame. I whispered into the room, voice low, cutting. "You think you've risen above me, but you've only sunk lower, and the world will see you for what you are." The documents on my desk, the recordings in my laptop, the notes in my hand, together they were becoming a fortress. They had pushed me into the snow, but they had also pushed me into clarity, and clarity is lethal. The lodge was mine by law. My fight now was to strip them bare, to turn their obsession into their downfall. I placed William's cup beside the notebook and pressed my hand to the table. They lost Pasadena because of pride. They will lose Aspen the same way. Only this time, I will be the storm that takes them down. The morning after listening to Gerald and Sylvia's venomous words, I gathered the folder of documents, locked the metal box, and placed it carefully into my bag. The snow outside Denver had softened into slush, and the roads gleamed wet beneath a pale sun. My destination was clear: the office of Margaret Cole. Margaret had been my friend for more than 4 decades. We had studied together when we were young women, and while I had chosen teaching, she had pursued law. She had built a reputation in Denver as one of the toughest estate lawyers in the region. When William and I put the lodge into a trust, it was Margaret who drew up every clause, her hand precise, her eyes sharp. I trusted her more than anyone alive. Her office was on the 10th floor of a downtown building, the kind with glass windows that caught the city skyline. I entered with my bag tight against me, the receptionist recognizing me at once, Mrs. Ah. "Hale, she's expecting you." Inside, Margaret stood as I walked in, her silver hair tied back, her suit crisp. She embraced me quickly, then gestured to the leather chair across from her desk. "Sit, Vivian. I saw the storm. I knew you'd come." I laid the folder on her desk. My voice was steady. "They tried to throw me out, Margaret. Andrew, Clara, Gerald, Sylvia. They think the lodge belongs to them. They think I'm finished." She opened the folder, her practiced hands scanning each document, the deed, the trust, the insurance policies, the tax records. Her eyes sharpened as she read. She looked up after several minutes, her voice measured, deliberate. "Vivian, the lodge is untouchable. You are the sole trustee. The living trust is ironclad. No court in this country will side against you. Legally, you hold every key." Relief was not what I felt. I had expected this. Instead, I leaned closer, my voice low, edged. "Then why does it still feel as if they have power?" Margaret closed the folder and folded her hands. Her expression softened, but her words carried the bite of truth. "Because, Vivian, their power isn't in law. It's in blood, Clara is your daughter. She can wield guilt like a weapon. They won't fight you with papers. They will fight you with sentiment. They will threaten you with the one thing they think you cannot bear: separation from your grandchildren, isolation from family ties. They will tell you that standing firm means losing love. The words cut because they were true. Clara had already hinted at it in her call. Margaret saw my silence and pressed forward. You need to decide now. When they dangle those bonds in front of you, will you waver, or will you hold the line? I straightened my back, the chair creaking beneath me. My voice came firm. I will not waver. Love that comes with conditions is not love. I won't let them ransom my dignity in exchange for access to my family. Margaret nodded once, a spark of pride in her eyes. Good. Then here's what we do. Document every encounter, record every call, keep a log of every threat. If they come near the lodge again, call the sheriff. I'll be ready with injunctions, restraining orders, whatever is needed. They want to test your strength? We'll show them iron. I watched her as she spoke, grateful not just for her legal acumen, but for her unwavering steadiness. She had fought battles like this before, children clawing at inheritances, siblings tearing families apart. She knew the ugliness, but she also knew how to strip it bare and defeat it. I reached into my bag, pulled out my notebook, and slid it across the desk. Pages filled with my handwriting. Andrew's words, Sylvia's sneer, Gerald's obsession, Clara's confession. Margaret read them quickly, her lips tightening. Perfect. This is evidence. Keep writing. Don't let emotion blur the facts. Their arrogance will hang them. Her words strengthened me, but I also knew she was right. They would not surrender easily. They would try to break me through what they believed was my weakest link, Clara's blood tie. Margaret's warning echoed in my mind like a command. Do not let guilt undo you. I lifted William's chipped cup from my bag and set it on the desk beside the documents. Margaret looked at it, then at me. I said, "This cup survived everything. It reminds me I can too." Margaret smiled faintly, but her voice remained sharp. Then keep it close. You'll need that reminder in the days ahead. They will come for you again, Vivian. Harder this time. Be ready. I stood, collected the papers, and locked them back into the box. The city hummed below us, traffic streaming through wet streets. As I left her office, Margaret's final words followed me. You have the law, Vivian. But more importantly, you have the truth. Don't let them twist either away from you. The elevator doors closed, and in the mirrored reflection, I saw not a widow worn down by betrayal, but a woman sharpened by it. I whispered into the empty space, voice clear, unshaken. They think they can use family as a weapon. They've forgotten who taught Clara what strength looks like. They've forgotten who I am. The doors opened to the lobby. I stepped out into the city, my bag heavy with papers, my chest light with resolve. Margaret had confirmed what I already knew. The lodge was mine by law. But more importantly, she had reminded me that the real war would not be fought on paper. It would be fought in the heart. And on that battlefield, I had already chosen my ground. The knock at my door came sharp, deliberate. I opened it and found them standing together. Andrew in front, Clara at his side, and behind them Gerald and Sylvia, their faces set with confidence, as though the city itself bowed to them. They did not come as family. They came as a delegation of threat. Andrew stepped forward, his shoulders squared, his voice steady but laced with menace. If you don't hand over the lodge, don't expect to see your grandchildren again. We won't bring them to you. We won't even let them hear your name. You'll be erased from their lives. The words hit like ice, but my face did not flinch. Inside, my blood burned. Not from fear, but from clarity. They were willing to weaponize innocence, to turn children into bargaining chips. That was their strength? That was their morality? Sylvia's voice cut in, silk over venom. Face it, Vivian. You need us more than we need you. Who will you have if not us? You are an old woman alone in Denver. Family is your only refuge. If you want to keep us, you know the price. Sign over the lodge. Gerald crossed his arms, his expression smug. It's simple math. You give it up, you keep your ties. You refuse and you rot in isolation. Either way, we win. For a moment, silence held the hallway. Clara's eyes darted to the floor again, but this time I caught her glance before she turned away. There was no hesitation in her stance. She had chosen her side. I drew myself taller, my chin lifted, my voice like steel. Family is not built on extortion. Family is not a bargain struck in hallways. If you believe you can hold my love hostage, you have already lost it. Andrew's jaw tightened, his tone rising. Don't play strong with me. You think law will save you? Law doesn't hug you on holidays. Law doesn't sit at the table. You'll be alone. Think about that. I stepped closer, meeting his eyes without wavering. Better to be alone with integrity than surrounded by traitors in borrowed comfort. Gerald scoffed, muttering to Sylvia, "She doesn't get it. She never did. Pride has blinded her." Sylvia sneered, her pearls glinting in the light. "No, Gerald, it's not pride. It's delusion. She still believes dignity feeds her at night." Then she turned to me, her voice dripping contempt. "Dignity doesn't keep you warm, Vivian. Family does. And you're throwing that away." I let the words hang in the air, then struck with my reply. Family that threatens, that betrays, that pushes a mother into the snow is not family. It's rot dressed as blood, and I will not feed on rot. Clara finally spoke, her voice trembling but defiant. "Mother, stop pretending you don't care. You'll miss us. You'll miss them. Don't force me to choose between you and the life I've built, because if I have to, I'll choose them every time." Her words pierced, but I refused to let them wound. I answered with measured calm. "No, Clara. You already chose. You chose silence when I needed your voice. You chose ambition over loyalty. You chose them. I won't beg to be picked again." The tension in the air tightened, heavy and unrelenting. Andrew clenched his fist, then dropped it, his frustration evident. Gerald shook his head in disdain. Sylvia laughed softly, cruelly. Clara turned her face away. I opened the door wider, gesturing outward with finality. "You came here thinking threats would bend me. They only carved the truth deeper. Leave now. Take your poison with you. My house will not hold it." Andrew's glare burned as he stepped back, his voice sharp with warning. "This isn't over. You'll regret standing against us." I held his gaze until he turned. "No, Andrew. You will regret standing against me." They left together, their footsteps fading down the hallway, their unity forged in arrogance and entitlement. I closed the door behind them and stood in the silence, the echo of their threats still vibrating in the air. I pressed my hand against William's cup on the counter, the crack catching against my palm. They thought isolation was their weapon. They thought loneliness was their trump card. They didn't understand. Solitude had never broken me. It had built me. My voice filled the empty house, calm and cutting. They came with blood. They left with nothing. And soon, the world will see what they truly are. The papers were ready. The recordings were safe. And now, with their threats exposed, I had their malice on record too. They thought they could frighten me into surrender. All they had done was give me proof of their corruption. The battle line had shifted. The storm they believed I could not endure was already breaking against me, and I stood unshaken. The moment the door closed behind Andrew and Clara, I walked straight to the desk. Their threats still rang in my ears, every word sharp enough to carve scars. But scars can become armor. I pulled out my notebook, uncapped a pen, and wrote in clean, deliberate strokes. "Andrew, if you don't hand over the lodge, don't expect to see your grandchildren again. Sylvia, you need us more than we need you. Clara, I'll choose them every time." Each line I recorded was not just memory, it was ammunition. I dated the page, underlined their words, and left space for more. The notebook would become my fortress. I reached for my phone. Dozens of messages blinked on the screen. Some from Clara, half apologies laced with manipulation, half warnings wrapped in desperation. "Mother, you'll regret this. Please just let us have it. You don't need it anymore. Others came from Andrew, short and venomous. You can't fight us forever. Think of the kids. I screenshotted every one, saved them to a folder marked evidence. Then I opened my laptop, pulled up the security footage from the lodge again, and replayed Gerald's words. Ordinary is death. Sylvia's promise, I will not die being pitied. I transcribed them line by line into the notebook. Their faces froze on the paused video, arrogance etched into every wrinkle. I labeled the entry, The Monroe Obsession, recorded. I whispered into the silence, my voice steady. William, you built the lodge with timber and stone. I will build its defense with truth itself. Every nail you drove, every beam you raised, I match with a word recorded, a threat captured, a lie exposed. The night stretched on, the city outside quiet under its coat of snow. Inside, the scratch of my pen filled the air, constant and sharp. I organized each section like a ledger. Column 1, date and time. Column 2, speaker and words. Column 3, corroborating evidence. January 14th, 8:30 p.m. Andrew at my door. Hand over the lodge or lose the grandchildren. Witness, Gerald, Sylvia, Clara. January 14th, 8:33 p.m. Sylvia. You need us more than we need you. January 14th, 8:35 p.m. Clara. If I have to choose, I'll choose them. I paused, exhaled slowly, and then added the final line. Outcome, all threats recorded, none successful. My hand did not shake. The ink flowed as if fueled by the storm outside. I remembered Margaret's words, document everything, and I understood their weight now. Memory fades, but ink endures. The phone buzzed again, a new message from Clara. You are making this worse. If you keep resisting, you'll lose everything. I saved it without hesitation, then added to the ledger. I spoke aloud as I wrote, each syllable laced with iron. They think intimidation is strength. They don't know resilience. Hours passed, the notebook filling page by page. My study transformed into a war room. On one side, William's cup. On the other, stacks of deeds, trusts, and insurance policies. Between them, the growing record of betrayal, dated and sealed in my hand. I stopped only once, to look at the photo of William on the shelf, his eyes kind, his smile steady. I whispered, they think they can bury your legacy under their hunger. They don't know that your legacy is me. I sat straighter, gripping the pen again. This was no longer about survival. It was about strategy. If they came back, I would not merely endure, I would expose them. I pulled out a separate pad and drew a timeline. Past threats on one side, potential moves on the other. If they try legal channels, counter with deed and trust. If they try emotional pressure, record and transcribe. If they trespass again, call sheriff, provide footage. Every scenario met with a prepared strike. The storm outside roared once more, rattling the windows, but I felt nothing but fire in my chest. Their words had been meant to weaken me. Instead, they had become the foundation of my resolve. I whispered again, voice firm, cutting through the silence like a blade. They wanted to erase me with fear. I will erase their lies with truth. By the time the clock struck midnight, the notebook was half full. Each page bore their voices, their threats, their arrogance, transformed into evidence. I closed it with finality, pressed my hand against the cover, and spoke to the dark. This is my shield. This is my sword, and with it, I will not fall. I placed the notebook beside the locked box of deeds, the two weapons together on the desk. Then I turned off the lamp. The room plunged into darkness, but inside me, there was light enough to guide the war ahead. The road back to Aspen was black ice and shadows, but my hands on the wheel were steady. Beside me sat Ethan Carter, my neighbor, a retired Army officer turned security consultant. His eyes scanned the road like it was enemy terrain. He had been with me when William passed, had shoveled my driveway during storms, And when I told him about the threats, he didn't hesitate. If they've taken over the lodge, I'll stand with you. People like that only understand strength. By the time we reached the property, the sky was pitch, but the windows of the lodge blazed with firelight. Shadows moved inside, the sounds of clinking glasses and loud laughter carrying into the cold night. They weren't visitors. They were living as though they owned it. Ethan killed the headlights, and together we walked across the snow-crusted porch. My boots pressed into the ice, each step deliberate. My bag was heavy with documents, my notebook inside, every page filled with their threats and confessions. I pushed the door open without knocking. The scene inside was obscene. Andrew sat at the head of the table, carving meat with a knife that once belonged to William. Gerald poured himself brandy from my decanter. Sylvia wore my shawl again, as though draping herself in my skin. Clara sat beside Andrew, her face pale, but her eyes hard. Andrew slammed his hand on the table when he saw me. "Get out! This is not your home anymore. You're trespassing." Ethan stepped forward, his presence filling the room. "Watch your words, son. You don't get to decide who belongs here." I moved past Ethan, placed my bag on the table, and pulled out the folder. My voice was calm, sharp as a blade. "Here is the deed, the trust, the insurance policies. Here is proof of every cent William and I paid. And here," I said, pulling out the notebook, "is a record of your threats, your messages, your words caught on camera." I set the folder down with finality. "This is evidence, and this lodge is mine. You are the trespassers." Sylvia laughed, but it wavered. "You think paper will stop us? You're an old woman waving documents while we live in reality." I met her eyes, unflinching. Reality is the law. Reality is evidence. Reality is that everything you've said is recorded. Every insult, every scheme, every word about Pasadena and your hunger for status. Your reality is about to collapse. Gerald stood, his face red, his voice booming. "You wouldn't dare drag your own family into court. No judge will side with a bitter widow over her daughter." Ethan barked a laugh, stepping closer. "I've seen cowards like you before. You think intimidation is strength, but real strength is standing when you're outnumbered, and Vivian is standing." Andrew rose from his chair, his voice low but shaking with rage. "You'll regret this. Walk out now and maybe we'll let you visit the kids. Stay and you'll lose them forever." I leaned across the table, my voice even. "You already threatened that once, and I recorded it. Repeat it again, and it only strengthens my case." Clara's lips parted, but no words came. Her hands trembled in her lap. She looked at me as though searching for the mother she once knew, but I didn't soften. Not now. I tapped the notebook with my finger. "You thought silence was weakness. You thought pushing me into the snow would end me. You were wrong. Every word you speak digs your grave deeper. Keep talking." Sylvia's smile faltered, and Gerald muttered something under his breath. Andrew looked at Clara, then back at me. His voice cracked under pressure. "You can't fight all of us." I straightened, squared my shoulders, and spoke with the clarity of final judgment. "I don't need to fight all of you. I only need to fight with truth, and truth is already on my side." Ethan placed his hand on my shoulder, his stance protective, but silent. The room went still, the fire popping in the hearth the only sound. The Monroe family stared at me, their confidence unraveling, their arrogance leaking out like air from a punctured tire. I gathered the folder and the notebook, tucking them back into my bag. "Well, this is the last time I walk into this lodge without the sheriff at my side. Next time, you will leave in handcuffs. Enjoy your meal. It will be your last one here." I turned toward the door, Ethan at my side. Behind me, Andrew's voice cracked in fury. "You'll regret this, Vivian. You'll regret crossing us." I looked over my shoulder, my tone calm, cutting. "No, Andrew, you'll regret crossing me." We stepped into the night air. The snow crunched beneath our boots, the cold biting, but my chest burned with fire. They thought they had stripped me of everything. They didn't know they had only given me the chance to strike with precision. William's cup rattled softly in my bag with each step, the crack along its side catching the moonlight. It wasn't broken. It was unbreakable. Just like me. 2 nights after I confronted them, the storm finally broke. Not in the sky, but at the lodge itself. Margaret had worked quickly, faster than even I expected. She had contacted this county sheriff, handed over the deed, the trust, and copies of every document I had shown her. The case was airtight, the evidence undeniable. All that was left was execution. I drove up to Aspen again with Ethan. The night was sharp, the air brittle with cold, but my mind was clear. We parked near the lodge just as the headlights of 2 sheriff's vehicles swept across the snow. Their engines rumbled like judgment itself. Inside the lodge, through the windows, I saw them. Gerald pacing near the fireplace, Sylvia sipping wine, Andrew stiff in his chair, Clara motionless beside him. They didn't yet know what was coming. The deputies knocked hard, their voices carrying authority. "Sheriff's Department, open the door." Andrew opened it, his tone already hostile. "What do you want?" The sheriff, a tall man with a steady gaze, stepped forward. "We're here on official business. We have documents establishing ownership of this property. This lodge is not yours. It belongs to Mrs. Vivian Hale, sole trustee of the Hale Trust." I stepped inside behind him, my presence igniting chaos. Gerald roared, his voice shaking the walls. "This is a lie. We have every right to be here. She abandoned it. She doesn't deserve it." The sheriff didn't flinch. He unfolded the papers Margaret had prepared, reading them aloud. "By deed and trust filed legally in this county, ownership is vested entirely in the name of Vivian Hale. You are occupying without consent. That makes you trespassers." Sylvia shot to her feet, her voice rising, dripping contempt. "You can't call us criminals. We are family. Family has rights." The sheriff's eyes cut to her, unyielding. "Family doesn't grant you ownership. The law does. And right now, you are in violation of it." Andrew clenched his fists, his jaw tight. "You can't just walk in here and throw us out. We've made this place ours." I answered, my voice calm, but edged with steel. "No, Andrew. You've dirtied it with your arrogance, but the lodge remembers whose hands built it, and the law remembers too." Gerald lunged forward, pointing a finger at the sheriff. "You're making a mistake. We'll fight this in court. We'll ruin her." The sheriff shook his head, his voice final. "No court will save you. You've been recorded. You've sent threats. You've admitted to motives that have nothing to do with rights. You're finished here." He turned to his deputies. "Escort them out." The room erupted. Gerald shouted, Sylvia cursed, Andrew slammed his fist against the table. But Clara's eyes locked on mine. For the first time, I saw moisture glisten there. Not defiance, not arrogance, something closer to shame. Her lips trembled, but no words came. She looked at me as though searching for the woman she had abandoned, the mother she had betrayed. I held her gaze without blinking. My heart ached, but my spine held straight. She had made her choice when she stayed silent in Aspen. Tears now could not erase it. The deputies moved with efficiency. Gerald resisted, his voice booming with outrage. "We have a right!" The sheriff cut him short, his tone like stone. "No, you're trespassing, and unless you want cuffs on your wrists tonight, you will walk out now." Sylvia hissed at me as she passed, her pearls catching the firelight. "You'll die alone, Vivian. No one will remember you." I answered her without hesitation. Better to die remembered for truth than live despised for lies. Andrew glared as he stepped toward the door, his shoulders rigid. "You think this is the end? You've made enemies you can't silence." Ethan stepped between us, his stance unyielding. "Careful, son. You've already underestimated her once. Don't make the same mistake twice." Clara followed last, her head bowed. As she crossed the threshold, a single tear slid down her cheek. She didn't wipe it away. She didn't speak. She only looked back once, her eyes meeting mine, before she disappeared into the night. The sheriff handed me the documents one last time, his tone respectful. "Mrs. Hale, this lodge is yours. They won't be back without consequence. If they do, you call us immediately." I nodded, my voice quiet but firm. "Thank you." This house is not just mine, it's my husband's legacy. Tonight, you helped me defend it." They left, their vehicles rumbling down the mountain road, the Monroe family swallowed by the night. Silence fell inside the lodge, but it wasn't empty. It was righteous. The walls seemed to breathe again, the fire warming rather than mocking. I walked to William's chair and placed the chipped cup on the side table. My hand lingered on the wood, my voice soft but steady. "You told me never to let anyone erase my name from this door. I didn't. Not tonight. Not ever." The snow outside glittered in the moonlight. Inside, justice had been spoken, not with shouting, not with rage, but with the authority of truth. I stood in the center of the room, shoulders squared, my chest rising with controlled breath. They had come with threats, with blood, with arrogance, but in the end, the law had spoken, and I had not bent. The lodge was mine again. The deputies guided them down the icy steps, their flashlights cutting through the night. Gerald barked at the officers. Sylvia hissed curses under her breath, and Andrew muttered threats about revenge. But Clara was different. Her shoulders slumped, her steps uneven. She kept glancing back toward the lodge, as though torn between defiance and despair. When we reached the patrol cars, her voice broke through the cold. "Mother, wait." The sheriff paused, but I nodded. Clara turned, her face streaked with tears, her breath catching in the winter air. For the first time since this nightmare began, her mask cracked. She spoke, the words raw, unfiltered. "I just wanted one chance in my life to hold my head high, one chance not to feel like the girl everyone laughed at. Do you know what it's like to sit at dinner tables where people smirk because you don't belong? To walk into rooms where your clothes, your voice, your background scream ordinary? All my life I've felt small. The lodge, it was my chance to be seen, to be respected. I didn't want to be looked down on anymore." Her confession hung in the air, sharp and aching. I watched her chest rise and fall, her eyes swollen, her voice trembling as if every word pulled a weight from her chest. She wasn't only greedy, she was consumed by obsession, by the disease of needing validation from others. I stepped closer, my voice quiet but strong enough to cut through the cold. "Clara, listen to me. Respect does not come from walls of cedar or roofs of stone. Respect comes from gratitude, from character, from how you treat the hands that built your life. The lodge cannot make you taller in their eyes. It can only make you smaller in mine." Her tears fell harder. "I didn't mean to hurt you. I just wanted to stop feeling invisible." I answered without hesitation, my voice sharp but edged with sorrow. "Better to be invisible than to be remembered as ungrateful. Better to be underestimated than to betray your own mother. Do you hear me, Clara? To betray blood for the illusion of perfection is the greatest shame of all." She lowered her head, her sobs muffled. The deputies shifted uncomfortably, unsure whether to give us space, but I continued, unwavering. "You stood silent when they pushed me into the snow. You chose ambition over loyalty. That silence spoke louder than any words. And now you want me to believe your tears can undo it? No, Clara, tears are not currency. Gratitude is." Her voice cracked again, desperate. "Mother, please, I don't want to lose you." I steadied my breath, the sting in my chest undeniable, but my answer carried iron. "You lost me the moment you valued strangers' opinions above my love. Thieves can steal money. Time can take health. But only you could give away the bond between us. And you did. Not for survival, not for need, but for vanity." The night went silent except for the crunch of snow under boots. Even Andrew, Gerald, and Sylvia had fallen quiet, watching her unravel. Clara tried again, her voice smaller now. "I thought, if I gave Andrew and his parents the lodge, they would see me as worthy, that I'd finally belong. I didn't think—" I cut her off, my words sharp as frost. "No, Clara, you did think. And you chose wrong. You chose to hand my legacy to people who never lifted a finger for it. You chose to trade honor for status. And let me tell you this, status fades, but betrayal burns forever. Her shoulders shook as she collapsed against the side of the car, her hands covering her face. For a fleeting second, I saw the little girl she once was, the child who had clung to me in storms, who had whispered promises of love eternal. That image flickered, then died beneath the weight of her confession. The sheriff cleared his throat. "Mrs. Hale, we need to finish processing." I nodded, but before they guided her into the car, I gave her one final truth. My voice carried sadness, but it was anchored by resolve. "Clara, you wanted to stand tall. Let me teach you this. True height is not measured by the envy of others. It is measured by the gratitude you carry. And tonight, you stand smaller than ever because you lost that." Her eyes met mine one last time, glistening with despair. She whispered, barely audible, "I'm sorry." I turned away, my chest heavy but my spine unbowed. Sorry means nothing without change, and change starts with gratitude. The deputies closed the door, her figure swallowed by the dark interior of the car. The engine roared to life, carrying them away into the night. I stood in the snow, the lodge glowing behind me, my breath steady. Clara's bitter confession echoed in my ears, but it did not weaken me. It confirmed everything I already knew. They had not come for survival. They had come for pride. And pride is always the seed of downfall. I pressed my palm against William's cup in my coat pocket, its crack pressing into my skin like a scar. My voice whispered into the night, strong and final. Better to be looked down on and grateful than to be admired and faithless. And with that, I turned back toward the lodge. My steps were firm, my resolve absolute. The war was nearly over. The court had already declared what I knew from the beginning. The lodge was mine. The Monroe family left in disgrace, their arrogance shattered in front of strangers who now saw them for what they truly were. Margaret had prepared me for victory. Ethan had stood by me like an anchor, and justice had been spoken aloud. But as I walked back through the lodge alone that evening, touching the cedar beams William and I had raised, a thought pressed against me heavier than the storm clouds outside. Winning was not enough. Ownership was not enough. This house had never been built to be a battlefield. It had been built to be a refuge. I sat in William's old chair by the fireplace, the chipped cup in my hands. The firelight glowed against the crack in the porcelain. The cup endured because it had been cared for, not because it was hoarded. The lodge deserved the same. The next morning, I called Margaret and Ethan to meet me in Denver. We gathered in Margaret's office, the same one where she had once told me to stand firm. The folder of deeds and trusts lay on her desk again, but this time I slid a new document across the table. Margaret adjusted her glasses, reading silently at first. Then her eyes lifted, sharp with surprise. "Vivian, this is a transfer agreement to the Colorado Veterans and Orphans Foundation." Ethan leaned forward, his voice low. "You're giving the lodge away?" I shook my head slowly, my voice calm but unyielding. "Not giving it away, redirecting it. I retain full lifetime rights. No one will ever push me out again. But when I am gone, the lodge will not fall into greedy hands. It will belong to those who understand sacrifice, men, women, and children who know what it means to endure." Margaret frowned, conflicted. "You could leave it to distant relatives, or to a charitable trust in your family's name. Are you sure about this?" I answered firmly. "Yes. Desan is not meant to be hoarded, fought over, or used to polish status. It is meant to heal. William served this country before he built these walls. He always wanted the lodge to be more than a house. Now it will be." Ethan's jaw tightened, his eyes softening. "Vivian, that's remarkable. Soldiers returning from war, children with no parents, they'll have a place in the mountains, a place built by love, not ambition." I looked down at the cup in my hands and whispered, half to William, half to myself. "We built with wood and stone, but what we left behind must be built with truth and mercy. This is our answer to betrayal, not revenge, renewal." Margaret tapped her pen against the desk, then nodded slowly. "I'll finalize this today. Once signed, it will be binding. The Monroe family can fight all they want, but they'll never touch it again." Ethan placed a steady hand on my shoulder. "You just turned their greed into their defeat. They'll never understand why you did this, and that's the point. They only ever wanted power. You chose legacy." I signed the papers with a clear hand, each stroke of ink sharp, final. As the pen left the page, I felt no regret, only release. Margaret collected the signed documents, her eyes studying me. "You could have crushed them by keeping this house as a trophy. Why this choice?" I looked at her, my voice firm, edged with conviction. "Because trophies fade, Margaret, but healing endures. They wanted the lodge as a symbol of superiority. I will make it a symbol of compassion. That is how we win. Not by matching their arrogance, but by transforming it." The room went still, heavy with the weight of the decision. I lifted William's cup once more, the crack glowing in the sunlight streaming through the blinds. My lips curved into a faint smile. "This crack is not failure," I said softly. "It is survival, and survival should be shared." Ethan stood, his voice deep, steady. "You've turned the final page, Vivian. You've written an ending no one expected." I answered, my tone calm, decisive. "Not an ending, a beginning. The lodge will outlive me, outlive their vanity, outlive even their memory. And when veterans rest by the fire, when orphans laugh in the snow, that is the victory William and I always intended." Margaret sealed the documents in her case, her tone reverent. "Then it's done. The Hale Lodge will never again be a battlefield. It will be a sanctuary." I rose, gathering my bag, the weight of papers now light. My heart felt the same. As I walked to the door, I spoke one last truth. Let the Monroes chase status until it consumes them. I will leave behind something stronger: gratitude, shelter, love. That is the true inheritance. And with that, I stepped into the Denver sun, the air crisp, the future clear. 1 year later, the mountains glistened under a soft veil of snow. I sat on the wide porch of the lodge, the same boards William and I had laid by hand, now echoing with the sound of children's laughter. Their boots stamped through the snowbanks, their shouts rising like music against the crisp air. Inside, veterans rested by the fire, their faces calm, their shoulders finally eased of burdens they had carried too long. The lodge was alive again, not with greed, not with arrogance, but with purpose. Every beam seemed to breathe differently now, every window brighter because the house no longer bore the weight of vanity. I held the chipped cup in my hands, the crack still catching the light. It had survived storms, just as I had. I lifted it slightly toward the horizon, my voice low, steady. "William, the lodge has found its place, and so have I." Ethan sat nearby, watching the children play. Margaret had visited earlier, smiling at the sight of soldiers swapping stories over stew in the dining hall. They both understood what this meant. It wasn't just property. It was a sanctuary, a legacy redirected where it could not be corrupted. The Monroe family had disappeared into their own shadows. I heard whispers from mutual acquaintances, Gerald chasing schemes that crumbled before they began, Sylvia drifting from party to party, her pearls now little more than costume, Andrew sulking under the weight of debts he could no longer hide, Clara walking beside him, her eyes empty, her voice dim. I never heard from them directly. They never dared call, never dared step near the mountains again. That was my victory. Not shouting, not vengeance. Silence. The absence of their voices was the final sentence, harsher than any judge's gavel. They lived now with the truth they could not undo. They had been exposed, rejected, and replaced. I sipped from the cup, the warmth steady against the cold air. Children ran past the porch, one of them waving. I smiled faintly and raised my hand in return. Life had moved forward, unbroken, unstoppable. The lodge had become what it was always meant to be, a refuge, not a battlefield. As snowflakes drifted down, I let my eyes follow their quiet descent. My breath rose in clouds, each exhale calm, each inhale sure. The silence around me was not empty. It was full of peace, full of justice, full of finality. My voice rose once more, clear and resolute. Sometimes silence is not weakness. It is the last verdict, fair, enduring, and sharper than anyone expects. The cup rested in my hands, the snow fell soft, and the lodge stood unshaken. That was the end of their story, and the beginning of mine.